Roy, let me tell you, I had several clients that were dealing with addiction issues, and I was using the normal conventional resources for addiction. And there's something came to me and said, we need to come at this from a different approach. Like there's something missing in what I'm doing and how I'm helping these clients, right? And so when I went out and looked at alternative approaches to healing addiction, Roy was the first person that popped up in my Google search.
Wow.
And so I ordered the book. Yes, I ordered the book. And even though I sent the resource to my clients as well and gave that resource to them to order, I read it as well. And I was just blown away by his level of commitment and the absolute different approach that he had. And of course, learning about you as well, because I went on his website and learned about you there. But then I also got the chance to meet you at Mindshare last August. You guys were so cute, dancing together. We stole your husband from you. Do you remember this? A bunch of us girls were like, come over and talk to us. And so Roy got to sit on a bench with us and have a very long discussion with us girls about how much we adored him and you. So I'm just pleased to have you in my space. I'm really glad to be bringing you to these health coaches and some people on here that have their own emotional eating issues. So let's get right to it, and let's have you tell us all about this emotional eating thing and why it's so important that we are educated on what emotional eating is and how do we recognize it and all of that good stuff.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. And yes, I'm always happy to share my husband with others. He's got a lot of love to give, so it's no problem. Roy actually helped me, and 28 and a half years ago. I can't even believe it. So my story is I was deeply affected by food addiction, and I was an emotional eater. And basically I grew up with with a weight problem. So I call myself a fat girl. So I was overweight and I absolutely hated it. It was so miserable for me to be fat. And the funny thing is I look back at pictures and sometimes I was and sometimes I wasn't, but I always say that I had fat head. So I always thought that I was fat, and of course it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're obsessed with being fat and it's all you think about, you become fat, so it was definitely an obsession for me, and food was an obsession. And I tried all the things that people try. I mean, I did weight loss programs and, exercise programs, and that was all in high school years. And then as I got into college, I joined a 12-step program for overeaters, and I started reading self-help books and going to different workshops and codependent this, and this is back in the 80s. So basically, there I am. Hey. So that was really funny. It just gave me a message like your host has let you start your video. I'm like, okay.
Okay, here we go. But go ahead. Yes.
So anyway, I was really it was a big obsession for me, and so I started going to therapy. I left college and started going to eating disorders therapy because I was really digging in, like there's got to be something more to this. And that was an interesting experience, although it didn't really change my eating behavior. I mean, going to OA didn't change it. Going to therapy didn't change it. The self-help books I did not change it. And so, I'd get control for a time, but I'd always end up busting out and binging again, and then just going on that downward spiral of, binging and struggling. And so I got really despairing. Like I got to the point where I thought, I was a yo-yoer, so I'd go up my highest weight, I was about 50 pounds overweight. So I was about at 170, I think about 120 now. But I basically, I would yo-yo. So I'd go up, like a lot of times growing up, it'd be around 155. And then I'd struggle all summer long. I'd diet and I'd jog and I'd do everything I knew how to do. And I'd smoke cigarettes just to kind of, because I couldn't eat. So I was trying to, I had to do something. So I was doing all these things. And yet I literally would fluctuate between 155 and 152, the whole summer. No matter how hard I tried. And I think it was the snacking, but,
right.
that'd be it. But, anyway, so I basically couldn't ever, like, I did a lot of yo-yoing in my weight. I mean, I would like get up, like go up 20, down 10, up 15, whatever. And so, I thought to myself, I can't do this for the rest of my life. This is very unhealthy. Like, I knew gaining and losing was could really hurt you. And I was so unhappy with my weight, and I really thought, I can't do this for the rest of my life. Like it was a really desperate feeling. Like, I plan on living a long time, and I'm looking at 80 years of this stuff. And I basically thought, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I've hit, and especially because I was in a 12-step program, which is kind of tells you it's the end of the road. Like, this is the last house on the block. I'm like, well, if that's true, I'm totally screwed because it ain't working for me. And so, I knew some girls who were actually in the program with me, and one was hopelessly bulimic. And so what happened was, she had been obese, like really obese, and she lost the weight. And then she was struggling, the eating was starting to come back because, in my experience, when you're on the high of losing weight, you can sustain it. Like, that can keep you going. And the high of fitting into like better clothes and buying clothes. And it's this whole obsession that replaces the food obsession. And so, so that's what she had done. But when you reach your goal weight, you're kind of like, now what? I don't have something to work towards. It's actually very similar to, like they've said, people who go to the moon, who are astronauts. I mean, it's all about getting there. And then afterwards, this huge letdown and this emptiness because they don't have that goal to work towards. So it's true for an Olympian as well, but that's how it was for weight loss for me. Is once I'd reach a goal weight, I would start to get really empty. And so what happened for her was the same thing, and she began to overeat again, but she knew, she was looking at getting obese again. And so she became bulimic to try to control her eating because she couldn't control her eating. So she just started purging. Well, that takes on a life of its own, as it did for her. And she got really hopeless, and nobody could help her, Carmen. It was really, one of those situations where, like, she'd raise her hand to share at a meeting and everybody would kind of cringe, like, oh no, like, here it comes again, because it's so hopeless. It's sort of, you're uncomfortable just hearing it because you don't know what to do. You don't know how to help, and it's just out there. And she was so honest about it. So that's how it was for her. And one day I showed up at a meeting, and she said, she was leading the meeting, and she was so, like, everything about her was different. And she said, I haven't binged and purged in 2 weeks, and I haven't had the desire to. She said, the desire's been lifted. I get the chills just now talking about it. But I looked at her and I thought, what? Like, what? What do you mean it's been lifted? Like, what happened to you? And she was so, it wasn't just that. It was like everything about her. She was poised. She was confident. She was clear, so different than she had been. And I just thought, wow. So I sort of, made a mental note of that as I was circling the drain myself. And then this other gal I knew had the same kind of clarity when she shared a couple days later. And she said, yeah, I know how to follow the rules. I know how to do everything good and get an A, but I never surrendered. She's like, I've never surrendered. And somehow her saying that just hit me straight between the eyes. And I thought, oh my God, I've never surrendered. Like, I don't even know what that means, And so, but her clarity and the strength and from which she spoke, it was so remarkable to me. Well, turns out I ran into her a couple days later, and I said, what are you doing? There's something different about you. And she's like, oh, I'm working with this guy, Roy. And I knew who she was talking about because I'd gone to hear him speak before, and I was very touched. I cried the first time I heard him speak. I mean, just the tears were rolling. And people do that a lot. He draws blood, so to speak, often.
Yeah. Yes.
And so, because the way he talks just goes straight into your heart. He's just like, there's no filters. It goes
100%.
straight in. Yeah.
Yes.
So, anyway, so she's like, yeah. And then she said, so is this other gal, the bulimic one. She said, she's working with him too. I'm like, oh, it makes so much sense. Cause I heard this exact same quality in both of them, this clarity and this strength and this, it just was like straight between my eyes. And so I just said, give me his number. I need to contact him right away. And I did. I literally went home and I contacted him. And I arranged to get together with him that night. It was a Sunday, and he was willing to see me. And I got together with him and laid it all out for him, and my hopelessness, basically. And turns out that's the kind of person he works with, like somebody who can't get it by conventional means. Like they just can't get it. They're slipping and sliding all over the place. And so I was an ideal client for him, and he started working with me, and boy, it changed everything. Like everything just like that started turning around for me. And the big thing is that he not only gave me the time and attention I really needed. I wasn't getting enough of that. Even in therapy, you lay your guts out there, but then, in 50 minutes you have to pack them back in.
Put them back in the room with you and bring them back next time.
Yeah. And same with the meetings I was going to. It just, like it's time, and then everybody disperses. And I'm like, I need more than that. And so that's what he does for people. He gives people a lot of time and attention, and he also helps people see that their problem isn't about food. Like it's really not about food. Food is a symptom. Overeating, overweight, they're all bulimia. They're all symptoms of deeper issues. And he helped me get down to what those issues are. And so that made all the difference in the world for me. So that's what happened. And then I just, because I was like spent so much time with him, I would witness his helping other people. And I just was so struck by how effective he was, and really, again, reaching people who are typically unreachable. And so I just loved witnessing him, and he's very spiritual, and he's got so much wisdom to share that I just would absorb it. And so I never let him out of my sight, like I just hooked my little wagon up to his, and I'm like, I want to help you. I want to help make this happen. And so that's what I've been doing for 28 years. And I ended up, he ended up marrying me because he couldn't get rid of me. So that was a lot later, but yeah, so he's my husband now, but our commitment is really to helping people with eating disorders and all addictions, because they're all symptoms. Like they're not the issue. You can talk about body image, calories and food and what it does to you in your body, but for people who are really out of control, that's really beside the point. It's really an emotional, psychological, spiritual issue. And so that's really what we're about. And this year I've decided, because his work is very deep dive in person, it's a 28-day program. So it's for people who are really serious about completely transforming their lives. That's what he's committed to. He knows he can produce results, so that's where he plays, that's how he does his work. Because I know how magical what he teaches is, and I've learned so much, and my transformation has been so profound. I've started Heal Your Hunger this year, and a Heal Your Hunger podcast and show, and I'm going to be coming out with programs really to take what I've learned from him and all that we've learned from working with people for close to 30 years to heal. I'm taking that more into the online space so people all around the world can get benefit even if they can't come in to work with him. So that's really what Heal Your Hunger is about. And it's focused really on emotional eaters and food addicts. Anybody who struggles with food, because that's my favorite thing to talk about. I mean, I was as I said, a fat girl, and it's, I know how hopeless it is and can feel like when you can't stop eating or can't stop controlling your behavior. And to me, it's the hardest addiction to overcome, clearly, because you have to take the dragon out of the cage 3 times a day. And so it's a tricky, you can't just put the plug in the jug. It's a tricky thing. So that's what I'm up to. And it's really exciting. And I'm just excited to be here and telling you and your audience about it.
So let's talk a little bit about what, because I have, I've always been fascinated by addiction, and I've always, because I have it, my family has a history of it, it goes generations back. And so you always kind of keep your finger on the button for yourself when it's been in your family. It's in my husband's family, it's in my family. And then I'm starting to learn, the more people as we grow older and the more people we get closer to, it's everywhere. And it's not limited to substance abuse. It's not limited to alcohol, drugs, and smoking, and all of those things. And having been a former smoker, I mean, I would I would literally go down with the ship with my hand above the water. Cigarette. I was like you, like I had to have something to do. You know, that oral fixation was overbearing. I would exercise for 3 hours in the morning so I wouldn't smoke. And then I'd get in my car and I would smoke. And then I would fill the cigarette pack with water so that I wouldn't smoke another one. And I'd go buy more. So ultimately it was like, I shamed myself into quitting. Like I guilted myself into that, but I never got underneath the reason why it was such a thing for me anyway. And so what are your thoughts about, like, I think is it a numbing thing for everyone when we're reaching out to other things to cover up something in our lives? Are we numbing from the things we don't want to face? Like, what's been your experience with that?
Absolutely. That is my experience. What we realized from working with people for so many years that there's 3 primary emotional drivers of all addictions. It doesn't matter what it is. And we call it the PEP test. Okay. So P stands for painkiller. So we use our addictions. You know, I used food as a painkiller, and I also had issues with alcohol as well, because I'm a sugar addict, and alcohol is the most refined form of sugar there is. So I was a blackout drinker at like 14, you know, because I was so sensitive to the alcohol. Once I started drinking, I would overdrink. So, but anyway, whatever the addiction, my primary one was food. You know, I used food as a painkiller because of the pain I had. And you know, oftentimes when people are like, I'm not in pain. Well, stop overeating and you might find some pain there. You know, it's, you know, our addictions keep the pain at bay. That's why we do it. And that's why we're unaware. But, you know, I mean, not everybody is, you know, was perhaps traumatized as a kid, but there is, for emotional eaters and food addicts, there's a lot of trauma, you know, often sexual abuse in their past, and as it was for me. And so we do bury a lot of pain. And also, especially for people with food addiction, you know, we started stuffing at such a younger age than we did maybe smoking or drinking or using drugs, because, I mean, although kids are getting, you know, more into it younger and younger, but I mean, I was stuffing my feelings at age like 3 or so, because food's available. It's available, it's sanctioned, you know, and so
socially acceptable, and you have to have it. I mean,
yeah, exactly. So I basically stunted my growth at that age when I just started stuffing. And I would literally, I mean, on the weekends as a kid, I would, you know, we'd order pizza or whatever, and we'd have donuts in the morning, and I would eat I'd eat so much carbs and fat and sugar that I'd end up puking at the end of the night involuntarily. Like at night, on Sunday nights, it wasn't until I started getting help from Roy, I started looking back at my pattern. But I literally, on Sunday nights, it was like a common occurrence because my stomach was weak and I'd pour so much crap into it, and I'd be puking on Sunday nights. And I just realized, you know, there must have been a connection with, you know, hanging out with my family. I have a good family, but there was stuff there clearly. And so we were all in pain. And so hanging out with my family and just gorging myself, just to, as you said, to numb. And so that was a big thing. And I think it is for all addicts. We're killing pain for sure. E in the PEP stands for escape. And so a big part of addictions are escape. And escape from what? And usually fear, okay? Especially emotional eaters, we're very fearful, okay? It's really, there's a personality profile of an emotional eater that's different than from the average person, even different from other addicts. For instance, I believe that emotional eaters are even more sensitive than your average person or even your average addict. We're also very fearful, okay? So I had a lot of fear, and the food was a way for me to escape everything I was afraid of. So it was just sort of like, you know, I'm old enough to remember the Calgon commercials in the 70s, you know, Calgon, take me away, right?
I'm old enough to know that too.
Take me away, you know, and that's like what the food is. It's like, just take me out of the scene. Like, I don't want to deal with anybody or anything. Let me get my brownies, get my Haagen-Dazs, and sit in front of the TV and feel no pain, you know, feel nothing, especially the fear. So it's often an escape from life, from responsibility, and from fear. And the other P stands for punishment. And so this is something a lot of people don't think about or realize, but especially because food it's easy to see a drug addict putting a needle in their arm as being a form of self-hatred or punishment. But, overeating, eating macaroni salad or too many cookies, that seems like, just a reward, or, overindulging in something good or fun. But the way I ate and the extent to which I took it to gorging myself, where next day I've got zits and I don't fit in my jeans, and then I'm like canceling appointments with friends because I'm embarrassed and feel disgusting, that is a form of punishment. And that's what I would do to myself. It wasn't just a treat as I would think, the way I did it. It started out as a treat, let me get my favorite TV show, make it all set up, make brownies, whatever. But I couldn't stop myself, and it turned into a really ugly scene. And so that form of punishment is really what addicts are indulging in. And the reason is because we have a lot of guilt. And I think addicts in general carry a lot of guilt and shame, because of things they've done, or perhaps, it's both, perhaps we got shamed as kids, or we were carrying shame from sexual abuse or whatever, but we do hate ourselves, and we do end up punishing ourselves with these addictions. And so that's really the test for us, is it's pain, it's fear, and it's guilt. Okay, those are the three things, that we're using food as a painkiller, it's a form of escape, and a form of punishment. And so that's sort of our answer to the question of why do we do these things. And these are the things that people are doing. And I say it's always there. And I'm not talking about the occasional overeater. I think everybody emotionally eats because it's just too easy to do, and people don't want to deal. But it's not if it's not a chronic thing, and if they can't pull themselves back from it, if it really turns into an addictive habit, that's when you're really dealing with that numbing, as you said, and killing the pain and escaping the fear and punishing ourselves over guilt.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because, when you think about, you compare somebody that has an eating disorder, you have someone who drinks too much. You know how alcohol is the liquid courage. They say liquid courage, right? Because we are overcoming fears. You have a glass of wine, you're socially able to interact and be more of who you think you are, right? More personable, more happy. And so on the other hand, when you're thinking about food, doesn't it kind of do the same thing? Makes you feel like you don't have to deal with the fear because this is going to replace that for you. Is that very similar?
It was for me, I'll tell you. I call it solid courage, and whenever I would overeat, or I'd be jacked up on carbs and sugar, I would notice that I'd be more bold. I'd be funnier, when I'm with other people, like I'm more jovial. And I'll tell you that I always observed, Oprah had a long career, 20, 25 years on television. And she, of course, is like the quintessential, weight issue person.
Yeah.
But remember when she got really thin, like she did, like the first time she got thin, or maybe the only time she got that thin, I observed that her, when she was very fat and she hosted her show, she was very loving and affectionate with people in the audience, like hugging people and, just being really affectionate. But when she lost the weight, she was not so affectionate. She was a lot stiffer and a lot more like distant from people. And that's because she didn't have the protection of the food and the fat. And so that was true for me too. We use the food and the fat to protect ourselves from other people, but when we have that protection, we can go in a little closer because we're like, we know there's no fear of intimacy because we're not really going to get close because we have our food there first as a first line of defense. But definitely it gave me more courage, and it gave me strength to do things. Anything I was afraid to do, I'd eat. I'd have, late night writing papers. I'd have a little mound of candy bars by my side. I needed the food to get me through.
Yeah.
And that's definitely how it served me.
Yeah. I had a friend many, many years ago that we used to live across the street from me, and and he and his wife were married, and they had 2 children that my son played with regularly. And we looked at them as like this perfect little artsy guitar playing photographer, happy family. And then one day she drove by and said, "I'm leaving, and we've moved into a house over here, and Josh is living over here, and he's alone, and just wanted to let you know." And I was like completely blindsided, shocked. What in the world, right? And so I reached out to him and said, you know, if you need anything, let us know. We're right across the street. When the kids come to visit, please tell us. I got a message from him the next day, a text message, and it said, I am a sex addict. And I was like, okay. And I was in the middle of personal training outside in my yard. And he said, and I need some help. And I have to warn you ahead of time that I may act inappropriate towards you. So you may want to let your husband know that you're coming over. I was like, oh my, you know, here I was training. Yes. Blown away. Had no idea that this was going on. So anyway, I let my husband know I'm going across the street at this time. I'm going to try to support him and get him some help, lead him in the right direction because they weren't from here. Well, long story short, he said to me, you know, people who overeat wear all their problems on outside of their body. So everyone knows that there's pain, but people who don't, nobody knows what's going on inside of us.
Right.
I thought that was massively powerful. I thought that was just like, that's so true, because you see when someone gets to a point, either where their hair is falling out or they're super thin and their skin looks bad, or they are obese, you know where the pain is and how they're masking it. But with other people, you don't know that.
Yeah, especially sex addiction. It's such a private, secret thing for sure.
Yeah.
And it's so rampant too.
Yeah, I just thought that was just, I don't know. I thought it was just crazy that he said that, and it was powerful because I never, ever again after that looked at someone with a weight problem the same way ever. And I know we can all be judgmental. I think there's that piece of us that's natural. We're all human. You know, when you're working so hard to stay in shape and stay healthy, and then someone's, you know, driving a little rascal around, you're like, why aren't they just working out? I never, ever think that way ever again since that day.
Yeah, well, because it really is an addiction, and it's something people are powerless to stop on their own.
Yeah. Yes. True. So tell me, what was the most powerful thing that he did for you? Like, how did you get into the emotional pieces of your childhood? Did you go back as far as you could to find out where did this begin? Like, how did he guide you in that way?
Yeah, his method's called the Nelson method, and it's about, you know, he first connects with a client, and that's certainly what he did with me. He just connects, talks, you know, he's, as you know, he's got a great sense of humor and he's very personable. So you just kind of hang out with him and just really shoot the shit. I mean, it's like, it's not a formalized, it's so different than like treatment or therapy. It's just really comfortable and really like just informal. And that helps people let their guard down. He's very funny. He'll sing songs, you know, to make a point. You know, he's from Texas, so he's got like the whole file of country music songs that he'll pull up, you know, if one has the right verse just to make the point he's trying to make. So he's just makes people really comfortable. And so that's really the first step. And then what happens is there's a series of writing. There's a lot of work that people do, and they do a lot of writing and writing exercises to help draw out feelings and memories about their childhood. So there's a lot of childhood stuff for sure. That I think his biggest gift is that people get down to the root causes really quickly, because he's got this like transmission line to people's hearts, and because he disarms people, and so their defenses come right up. So it's really like a bubble of love that he really wraps around somebody. So when you're in this bubble, you're just letting stuff out. I mean, for me, for instance, I've been in therapy and eating disorders therapy twice a week for a whole year, almost a year. And I barely cried. I mean, I was just like, I was very in my head. And I think this can happen a lot in therapy, is that I was in my head and not accessing the emotions in my heart. And so I really couldn't get the pain out. It was just stuck inside of me. Whereas when I started working with him, like 4 days later, I sat down with him and the floodgates opened, and I must have cried for an hour, and he just held me, because I like all that pain, just I had no defense. It just came out of me. So that disarming effect that he has, and the love that makes it safe, enables people to just get right down to business really fast. And so, and not in a scary way, like that stuff just tumbled out of me. And then I was so much better, you know. I mean, I had unburdened myself of so much pain, and there was more pain to come out certainly down the road, and more work had to be done, but people unload that stuff really quickly. And so you don't just talk about it and get stuck with it. You talk about it and boom, it's like, it's out of you and it's healed. And so it's just a beautiful process. So So that's a lot of it. And it's both, it's mentorship, where people, learn how to live. Like, he really parents people. He works with adults, but they're only adult in age. I mean, we've varied so much stuff, and we're so young in our emotions because we've been stuffing them for so long. So there's a lot of reparenting, and a lot of what he's doing is really helping people build their self-esteem in such a concrete way. And so people are learning boundaries, because we typically have no boundaries on our time. Emotional eaters are consummate people pleasers. And so, I mean, all addicts are, but emotional eaters take the cake, pardon the pun.
Yeah.
So, no boundaries, always saying, and we're stressed out because we're saying yes to everything, and we're stressed out and then resentful. So there's this cascade of consequences that come from the way we're living. And so we have to we have to learn how to live differently. And it still has nothing to do with the addiction, because that's just like the caboose on the train. I mean, we have to deal with the first cars on the train, because the addiction is just a natural consequence of living the way I lived. If I was stressed out, people pleasing, no boundaries, resentful, afraid, and in over my head, I was going to need something to anesthetize my feelings with. So he really helps people just live differently and learn how to live. And so he's very, every part of a person's life gets evaluated and looked at. I mean, there's no stone unturned, and it has to be that way. Otherwise, that's the stone that's, causing their downfall. So, it's a very intensive process.
Let me ask you this question then. So, hey, Leah, let me answer this real quick. Leah, she's talking about her husband, Roy, who helped her when she first started moving through the emotional eating addiction that she had. Yeah, that was at the very beginning. So let me ask you this then. So since we have a lot of people that had mentioned they were joining because they have the emotional eating. I've seen their names here. But also, we are working with people that feel like sometimes their weight problems and their weight issues and their carb issues and their food issues don't have anything to do with emotions. And since we are not counselors and we are not psychologists or psychiatrists, we have to stay within our scope of profession to, for liability reasons. What's the best way that you think to help coaches beyond sharing resources like your book and all of that, but how can we support someone, or how can we even begin to introduce the idea that, it's really not about the Doritos, and it's not about this. Maybe it is about, I don't know, your own childhood trauma, or maybe it's about your husband being unfaithful, or maybe it's about something else. Like, how do you introduce that topic so sensitive and you want to turn someone off and make them defensive? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Well, I mean, personally, I always find the softest way to approach a subject is to talk from my personal experience. And so I don't know if coaches are willing to do that, but
they should.
Yeah, it's really, when I can say, and it doesn't have to be with food, if I can say, I find that when I'm afraid to make a phone call, a business call or whatever, I want to all of a sudden get up and go to the kitchen. Like, it's like just automatic,
Mm-hmm.
But I realize I'm not really hungry because it's 10 in the morning and I ate at 8. So, I'm probably not ready for anything to eat yet. So I dig into that a little. And then what I recognize is that I'm afraid, like I have something that's causing me anxiety, and immediately I want to sort of quell that feeling. And so, and whether it be food or a cigarette or whatever, that coaches, that what their, drug of choice, if you will, is, if they don't mind revealing that they get that craving from fear, or from a hard task, or from a trouble with their kid or whatever, that boy, all of a sudden they're jonesing for like a snack or whatever. Maybe that personal story could help somebody understand it. And you can be blunt and say, I was really looking to stuff my feelings. And I'll tell you, I mean, I always thought I just liked food, and a lot of people who are in denial about being emotional eaters, and it's amazing how much denial there can be. I mean, it's really, because people are always telling me, because I say what I do, and they're like, very large people, women will say, oh, I don't have that problem. I'm like, okay, that's hard to believe, but okay.
Yeah.
And so, but we're all on a spectrum of awareness. And I thought I just liked food, you know, for the first 16, 17 years of my life. No consciousness whatsoever of having to be connected to emotions. And my oldest sister started on her path of healing. She was 5 years older, and she was getting help. And she said, yeah, I eat over my emotions. And when she said that to me, I thought that was absolutely the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. It sounded so dumb. And so, of course, I sort of chided her. But I'll tell you, from that moment on, my consciousness started to change around my food. And within 2 years, I was looking for a meeting to go to for my overeating. So any suggestion, you know, as hard as it is to make it, do it anyway, because that could be the catalyst. I mean, I always credit my sister for helping me start my path of healing, because she did go before me and trying to figure it out. And her literally just saying, I eat over my emotions, started working on my consciousness, even though at the moment I'm like, that's ridiculous. You know, I said that, but nevertheless, it was true. It was true for her. It was certainly true for me. And that truth will, you know, it taps on our consciousness until we finally fess up to it.
Kind of like that. It's almost like it's almost like the instinct that's underneath your instinct. You know something, that there's something to pay attention to. And sometimes someone just says something that makes you go, now I can't ignore it.
Yeah. No, you can't.
When you're coming to the surface.
Totally. You know, and I will definitely, I'd love to recommend my Heal Your Hunger show, because I'm all about emotional eating. Like, it's like, I'm not, you know, talking about other things. It's really every topic connected to emotional eating. So I think it's helpful for people, because that's what I'm talking about, to sort of start to say, now I start to understand, like, I'm getting sort of what that even means, you know. And I always say to people, to be honest, I always say, just sort of to clear the air of any tension, I say, look, everybody's an emotional eater. I just put it out there. I say, everybody emotionally eats, especially women, you know, we're emotional and we like to eat, you know. So, you know, I always say that just to sort of give everybody a pass in a way, you know, so they don't have to like everybody's in this boat. It's just a matter of where you're sitting in the boat, you know. And I have a thing called the emotional eating quiz, which helps people because they don't know where they are, or if they are. My quiz is called Are You an Emotional Eater or a Food Addict? And what it's really talking about is this spectrum, because we're all on the spectrum. It's just a matter of, you know, how into it we are and what the consequences are, like how grave the consequences. And so when somebody takes that quiz, they get a personal score, and it helps them sort of see where they are on the spectrum. And so that could be helpful as well.
We're going to send that out with the recording so everyone who registered is going to get an access to that link. You know, awesome. I think it's one of the things I like to tell people is that everybody has something, whether it be, you know, alcohol, whether it be exercise, it doesn't matter. Everybody has something. And so I know that you've seen this too, you and your husband, where someone could be addicted to alcohol, and then they quit drinking, and they're like, well, I'm sober, I don't drink. And, okay, well, then maybe they're overworking. Okay, well, maybe they're not overworking, but maybe they're smoking. Maybe they're not smoking. Maybe they're exercising too much. Like, that is just, to me, running from the problem, never facing what it really is, so that we can stop all of this replacement numbing behavior, face ourselves without judgment, get some help for whatever it is that's causing that problem, so that we can really be present in our lives. Do you think that you see that a lot?
Absolutely. You know, I call it switching deck chairs on the Titanic, you know, like
I love that.
You're still going down, you know,
unless you get in the boat.
Yep. So it's such a big tendency. And I think that's one of the drawbacks of 12-step programs. I mean, I'm all for 12-step programs, but I will say, you get people focusing on one addiction in one particular program, and so it's easy to sort of be focused on the stopping of that addiction and not dealing with the underlying causes. It's really why Roy and I do what we do, is because so many people are doing that, and they're switching addictions because it's not about the addiction, but they haven't gotten that message. And so, you know, an addict will absolutely, you know, have to jump to other addictions if they don't deal with the underlying causes. I mean, it's a foregone conclusion. That's why you can always see where an AA meeting is, because there's a bunch of smokers outside the hall.
Yes. Coffee drinkers and smokers. I remember going to those meetings when I was little. My dad quit drinking and made us go to these meetings so we could understand it. And I'm like, this is like my version of hell. I'm 10. Why am I in this place? This is awful. And he quit. He actually quit drinking for 26 years. And then his doctor, of course, did that. You should have 1 glass of red wine for your blood pressure. And so he did, but he never, that's it. He measured in a measuring thing. Like, he never, ever went back to that behavior again.
Wow.
Now, maybe once every couple of weeks, he'll have 1 glass of red wine with dinner or something, but I never, so something in him must have fixed that behavior or replaced it with something else. I don't live there for a long time now, so I don't know, but I thought that was really interesting because my mom wanted to kill him. She was like, you've got to be kidding me. What we went through with all of that, and you're going to pick it back up. And she's got I've got my finger on your button. I'm watching everything you're doing. Right. Well, he never slipped back into that behavior again. But
that's definitely the exception.
It is. But I honestly think that there's some work replacement going on there for when he was working and then he retired and now it's something else. So I do know there are other things going on. So, I think that when you were talking earlier about how Roy cuts right to, like, he gets right into your heart. And I know that to be true because he stood there and talked to all of us ladies who had a couple glasses of wine at that event, and we were goofy and he was so patient. But, when you say that, don't you think that everything that we are all dealing with when it comes to trauma and fear and sadness and addiction and numbing all has to do with lack of love in our lives at some point, where we either didn't recognize it, we weren't given what we thought we should have, or we have a big hole that we know should be filled. And really, truly, love is the one thing that does that. Correct? Totally.
Absolutely. We're always feeding that emptiness, whatever we're feeding it with, it's always, it's a void. And I love God, whatever. I mean, to me, it's ultimately a spiritual void, and because that's what's healed me is having a spiritual connection.
Mm-hmm.
But it is synonymous with love in my experience. And sometimes you have to experience that. I mean, that's why Roy's so, effective with his clients, is that he is literally loving them back to health. I mean, he has so much, love flowing through him, and it's just, it's healing people. What it's doing is, what I think it's literally doing, excuse me, is he's touching people's hearts. So their hearts open. And in the way I see it is their hearts are open to God's healing. Because Roy I call him a spiritual healer, but he doesn't call himself a healer because he's like, it's God who's doing the healing, not me.
Yeah.
Spirit, universe, to me, doesn't matter what you call it. They're all insufficient names for what it is.
Yeah.
But that's literally what's happening is the love is softening somebody's heart so that their defenses come down and then they can be healed, and that's why it's so effective, because his love is just he just has this way of putting people at ease and opening up to where they know they're safe. It has so much to do with the feeling of safety. Mm-hmm. People really have to know that they're safe in order to let down their guard. Because I think people have this sense that they're not safe. They're not in a safe world. And that's, again, when they're spiritually disconnected, they have a feeling of, it's me against the world. I'm not one with my fellows.
Yes.
And so it's like I've got my dukes up all the time, and I can't put them down or else I'll be eaten,
Yeah.
So they're sort of in a eat or be at mentality.
Right. And it's really hard, I think, also in my experience too. I'm a big believer in therapy of all kinds. I think that we all should have that objective viewpoint into our lives, or someone we can be completely safe with, so that we can let that guard down. And, having been in therapy all my life off and on over the years, it's very difficult to find the right fit for you when your heart is closed, because when there is someone that's heart is open and they're willing to help you and your heart is closed, you're like, well, they just weren't for me. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have known that to be true. Thank God. I love, people that I'm with now. They're wonderful. But, I think that it can be for a health coach, one of those things that when we're talking to our clients, and I know I've done this many times over the almost 7 years I've been coaching, I have said, I think it's time to take a deeper look at the harder subjects. So let's look exactly at maybe, what is going on with the spouse. Because I have an intake form that's 14 pages long. And on there, we do ask, is there someone in your life that's sabotaging you? And is that person you? So many times I think that people can use that, the excuse of trauma, the excuse of pain, to continue to live that life because they want to be the victim. Have you found that to be true as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, addicts are like the consummate victims, like that's what's fueling their addiction is, woe is me, look how hard I've had it. And healing has to be about taking responsibility. I mean, that's all we're about, is helping people see it's not about taking blame. It's just about stopping blaming somebody else and looking at how we can turn that story around. Because as long as we're victims and it's happening to us and we're at no fault, we will keep it. Roya says, I had a victim stamp on my forehead, and everywhere I went, I kept getting victimized because it's like victim, and that's really the truth. When we come from that mentality, we will, people are like, I don't know why this Jim Rohn, the wonderful motivational speaker.
Love him.
Yeah, he used to say, people come up to me and they say, I don't know why this keeps happening to me. And he would respond, I don't know either. It just seems like it's things like this just seem to keep happening to you, like because you're attracting it, basically. I botched quoting him on that. Sorry. But anyway, it's absolutely true that we have to change that. And so that's so much of what we're about, is helping people. And it's so empowering. People don't realize how disempowering blaming is, and playing the victim is. It's comfortable. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love to get a good blame on, and just be like, oh, somebody's doing this to me. Isn't it sad? It feels so good. It's like a warm blanket, but it doesn't stay that way. It gets stinky fast. It's like,
Yeah. Because then after all of the, oh, I can't believe this happened. Oh, that's over with. And you're left there and you're like, wait a minute. It's not so warm in here anymore. Now it's, I need more. You need more of that. So
it's so disempowering. So so taking responsibility is a tough pill. Looking for our part in what's happening is a tough pill. But the good news is we're there somewhere. There's always a place at which I put myself in that situation. Somebody I've been working with lately, she just texted me this morning. She talks to her ex-husband on the phone on her way to work because she's lonely and bored and she wants somebody to talk to. So she isn't there's nobody she's going to really just call and start jabbering with except her ex-husband, and they're friends. So it seems okay, but it's really it's not okay, And so, so this morning she's like, well, he called me, she's like, I know I answered. And that's the point, is like, he called me, seemed like then I was off the hook. I didn't call him, he called me. So I'm absolved of responsibility of what happened when I talked to him. No, you answered the phone, you knew better, but you did it. And it's just, we've got that little con artist and especially addicts have that little con artist in our minds where we're just trying to pretend it's happening to us. And we can't get better that way. One doesn't just stop overeating or stop an addiction. We have to grow up. We have to put on our big girl panties and get real about what's really happening, get honest. And if we do, we will heal, but not before then. I'll tell you, it does not, recovery does not happen without a lot of personal work, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And that's with anything. That's with anything that we feel, that is happening to us. I truly believe we have to turn it back around and look at ourselves first and say, what role am I playing in the dysfunction of the situation of my life? Yeah. And how am I contributing to the dysfunction of it? I know we're getting close to the time here, but I have a couple of comments here. Donna is saying, please tell Tricia I just ordered her book. I'm reading that. She turned on 3 light bulbs for me personally, and I want to learn more. I did share your link when you launched. I have bookmarked her blog, and we'll be referring her information to everyone. Thank you so much for this webinar. Wow. My daughter is currently training, this is Sandy saying, training to be a drug and alcohol counselor. She lives by LAX airport. She would absolutely love to connect with Roy if there's any possibility.
Great.
Yeah. Is there any way for her to get some, maybe make contact? Does he have a training or anything like that? Or how does that work?
We don't currently, but if she goes to his website, which is roynelsonhealing.com, definitely sign up on the updates, so when we do have local things happening, for sure, that would be great. We'd love to connect with her.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So Leah is asking, and you already kind of touched on this a little bit, about how you feel about groups such as OA that have a one-size-fits-all step process. And, that goes back to what you had said. Fine, you're dealing with the overeating, but what about the underlying problem? Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I was an OA flunky. So, and I'm never here to diss any program, because it isn't when you're dealing with food addiction, it isn't one size fits all. And so I know there's several people who have gotten a lot of help from, food 12-step programs. There's now several of them. There was first just Overeaters Anonymous, and now there's several offshoots. And the offshoots are primarily based on different food plans.
Okay.
And so, because a lot of people in OA, this is kind of the history as I see it. A lot of people in OA were like lifetimers in OA, but they never lost the weight. They were still obese, but they got comfort and support from going to OA meetings. That's when I was going. That was how it was before they had these offshoots. This is in the 80s. What happened is a lot of people got frustrated with that. Like, basically if somebody remains overweight, they're probably still overeating. I mean, that's just the fact. And so a lot of people got frustrated with that, and they wanted weight loss, and they wanted inspiration. They wanted to be inspirations. So they tightened things up. They got a food plan, and they got really strict about the food plan. And so they had weight loss results. And so these other programs, sometimes in OA, but especially in some of these other programs like Food Addicts Anonymous and these other things, they have some really profound weight loss results. But they also have a revolving door, and a lot of people going in and out, like losing a ton of weight and then putting on that weight again.
Yeah.
And the way I see it, and again, I'm not here to, diss anything at all, because a lot of people have had life transformations in these programs. And so, but there are people who don't get, like me, who don't get what they need there. And I do cover this in my book as well. And, how I see it is that the 12 steps are really about surrendering. Remember, I talked at the beginning about not being able to surrender.
Yeah.
The whole idea of the 12 steps is to surrender your will and life to God. And it teaches you how to do that. And that's really the key to overcoming an addiction. And our program is the same way. Like, what Roy teaches is really about helping people get out of their own way so spirit can work through them. He calls it sweet spirit. So spirit can work through them and do for them what they can't do for themselves, because we use an addiction to power us. So we need a different kind of power, a higher power, clearly. No negative side effects to having a higher power. But the problem with the food programs are that people, you can't just put the plug in the jug. And so they're like, how do you surrender food but still eat? So their solution is to have a food plan and get really really strict about your food, where you can't have one green bean more, and so that can be problematic. Clearly, it's very black and white thinking. I understand why they believe that way, but the problem is it kind of flies in the face of surrender in terms of giving up control, because there's a lot of control involved in the weighing and measuring process. And some people say, well, that's actually, I'm surrendering to the scale. Well, okay, that's fine. But the concept is still really about fear and control. And again, I'm sure I'm going to piss somebody off by saying this, but this is just my observation. And really, true recovery is about surrendering control. It's just that it's hard for people in those programs to do that, because they don't have a way to deal with the very deep lying, problems that come up. And so the problem is that it gets very hyper focused on food and weight loss, and that is missing the point. And so, if somebody can be in those programs and get really into the spiritual recovery part, great. That's what I recommend.
Yeah.
And then the real reason I'm doing the Heal Your Hunger stuff is because there are people who can't get it in those programs. And I want to offer an alternative that is more about the spiritual recovery and the healing and really getting down to the emotions, because that stuff, it's so easy to get stuck on the food and the food plan and the weighing and measuring and just the food obsession, like another form of food obsession. And to me, that's missing the point, basically.
Yeah. It's like switching the other direction, where you are so, like orthorexia, which is where you're so over focused on what's going in your mouth that you think that's the only method of control that you have, is to be so careful that nothing crosses your lips that has dairy or gluten or this. I mean, and then when that gets old, because how hard it is, you're still left with yourself. There you still sit with your problem.
That's why it's hard to get long-term recovery around the food, because it's, in my opinion, people just aren't healing at that deeper level, because that's what we have to do. I mean, it's inevitable. We have to do that, whether it's this lifetime or another. We're going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. All right. Well, we're running out of time, but I just want to thank you so much for being with us. And I could talk about this kind of stuff all day. I think it's fascinating. And I love that you're stepping outside of that, the box with this type of approach, because I mean, you can go to any bookstore and you can read about, there's books and books and books on food, but then you've got a tiny little section that talks about growth and self-help and healing and positive thoughts, but nobody's really talking about the emotional eating piece. So, your work is very valuable, and so is your time, and I'm just so grateful to you and appreciate you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Carmen. It's great to be with you, and great to be with everybody else who's here listening.
Yes. And I will see you this August, correct?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. I'll be watching for you guys dancing again this year.
Thanks so much.
All right. Have a good rest of the day. Thanks everybody for being with us.
Bye. Thank you.